close. My name is Gareth Soloway, Chief Market Strategist here at VerifiedInvesting.com. As always, a pleasure to be here with you guys to do a market recap on what has happened today. Now, in general, today was what we would call a slower market day. A lot of sideways chop. Volume was light, mainly because it's the rest of the week that everyone is waiting on pins and needles for, right? So we have tomorrow after the close mega cap earnings reports. Then on Wednesday, the Federal Reserve. Thursday, we have more mega cap earnings reports. And Friday, the non-farm payroll reports. So the rest of the week will be jam-packed. Granted, tomorrow during the day could be light, still waiting for those mega caps after hours. But nonetheless, it still should be more volatile with a little bit more volume than today. All right, so let's get right into the mix here. What are we seeing on the markets overall? If we look at and take a look at what the price action is, you can see generally for what we've seen lately, it's kind of on the quieter side. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down by 52 points. The NASDAQ is bouncing just a little bit up, about 59 points. The S&P 500 up 5. Oil is down again today. And again, remember this morning in the game plan, we saw a little bit of an upward move on the back of more tensions in the Middle East. But as I mentioned this morning in the game plan, don't expect those gains to hold. It just doesn't happen that way anymore with Middle East tensions unless it's a full-blown major escalation. All right, gold today down fractionally on the day, just about $2.80. And Bitcoin, this is a big one here, folks. Bitcoin, I gave you that $70,000 resistance to watch. It literally went up, hit it, and pierced it by a couple dollars, and then pulled back below 67,000. That's a $3,000 fall on Bitcoin before bouncing a little bit here into the end of the day. If we look at the heat map today, we can see pretty clearly here, generally flattish. You do see NVIDIA trading down 1% on the day. So if you're looking at different things, to me, semiconductors, based on what I'm seeing in the price action, probably have more downside to go. And the reason I say that is because, again, Apple's up a little bit today. Microsoft's up. We have Google/Alphabet up a little bit. Even Meta is flat to positive, but NVIDIA is down. If you look at Micron's down today. And so the price action to me tells me that there's still a fair amount of sellers, even in a flat to positive market. Now, remember, the semis were leading the market charge, so it makes sense that, again, if they're weak, the market is still very, very vulnerable to the potential of further downside, all right? So, again, just kind of doing a market wrap on this front as we continue to go through. So what we're going to do next is we're going to take a look at the S&P 500 on an intraday basis and look at what we're seeing there. Let's go through the market action. So here we have the intraday S&P 500. We'll go and zoom in on it. And what we can see is on an intraday basis, look at how much sideways chop there was today. We opened a little bit to the high side, came back in, went fractionally negative, rallied up, came back in, rallied up, and came back in. So when I said at the beginning of trading the close, it was a very sideways choppy day, that's exactly what it was. Volume was light, as I mentioned. Now, there are some things we have to take note of here. In fact, if we look at this chart, here's that big down day from last Thursday on the 10-minute chart. Notice how we retested and bounced. So that's a positive. But look at how the high of the initial bounce right here. So this was your big down day right here. There's your bounce. And look, no other day has pierced that high. So what that does for me is gives me a very firm level to watch as a pivot point for the market. So on a technical analysis basis, look at this. We can take that high and literally draw and connect it through all the other highs in the last 2 trading days, right? So this was, I think, on Friday. This was, again, on later in Friday. Actually, this was on Thursday after that big dip. We closed down here. Friday, and then today's action. So what does this mean? Well, let's break it down. It means that as long as we stay below this trend line, which is currently sitting on the S&P around 5,485, as long as we stay below, this market is vulnerable to a further break lower. And again, why am I saying that? Well, very simply put, what we can see here is that if we break above that level, there's really clear sailing, potentially all the way up to what we would refer to as gap fill, which was the close before that big market move. All right, so again, watch this level closely on the S&P 500. As long as we stay below, be very careful. This market could take another leg lower. Now, if we go to the NASDAQ 100, look at this. Amazing that this same sort of function, this same sort of price action is dead on. In fact, look at this. See this lower trend line? Pivot low to pivot low right through here. And look what we're attacking now into the end of the day. In fact, the markets just closed. Wow. This is where I get excited, folks, because the charts are just so freaking cool. I know it's kind of nerdy, but what can you do? But in any case, we closed right on top of this line. And what this tells me, this is what we call a wedge pattern, right? So a wedge pattern tells you that you're in between the low and the recent high. And ultimately, whichever way we break, you probably get a significant move in that direction. Closing right on the line, well, you still stayed on the line. So technically it's okay. But if we open below this level tomorrow and don't recapture it immediately, this market should retest our recent lows down here on the NASDAQ 100. Same thing. If we can close above this high, or if we get above this high tomorrow at around 467.85, then there's a potential for a big move up. Little bit of resistance at gap window. This is called gap window, and this would be gap fill. All right, so this is very, very intriguing to me because it really sets the table for something to happen tomorrow, either a breakout or a breakdown. And what's interesting about that is it sets the table going into the earnings tomorrow after the bell, where we could actually even have a breakout or breakdown going into those earnings that would likely then be continuation of that move on those earnings, right? So we always talk about the charts potentially dictating the next news to come out, like kind of like insiders have the inside scoop and they're already directing the market in that direction. All right, in the after hours today, what do we have? We have some earnings coming out. We have Tilray, which is a small marijuana stock, but it's a fun one to trade. TLRY is the symbol on that one. Let's flip to the after hours action and just see if we have anything there. So far, nothing. And to be honest, this stock is not a big company, but nonetheless, it is a fun one to trade. Here we have one, SFM, which is Sprouts Farmers Markets. Ooh, that one's getting a look at that pop. Nice pop on Sprouts here. All right, so a move up to $90 from a close of around $84.50. Let's go to our daily chart and take a look. What do we have? Wow, this thing's at all-time highs. Holy cow. So I don't really have any levels on this, to be honest. I don't have much on this in terms of charting levels at all, because once you get to all-time highs, I mean, I guess you can look for a channel. So that would be my go-to, is you look for a parallel channel. You connect some of these recent lows here. All right. So if we do that, we could do this. So basically that does give me a level here. And if we zoom in a little bit, the upper range of this would be around $95 to $96. So 95 to 96 could be a level on Sprouts. If we go to the intraday, we can still see it trading here. Let me just zoom in a little bit here on this. So if we go to that, it is still trading. Now, this to me tells me there's light volume, that you're not getting a lot more price action, but nonetheless, that's still a very, very good move on Sprouts in the after hours. At 4:05, FFIV will report. Rambus will report again. Lattice Semiconductor. Let's take a look at LSCC here. That is dumping out. That's a semiconductor stock dropping a little bit here. It's not a huge move. Looks like it closed at 55. It's trading at 52. So it did get down to 48, but bouncing a little bit already. But again, maybe not such good news for the semiconductor stocks here. All right, couple other things while we wait for the FFIV earnings at 4:05. NVIDIA today, as I mentioned, was weak, down $1.47, 1.3%. And the kicker here is that you had this channel break. So where is the most likely target for this? Well, very, very crystal clear here. Take a look at this pivot through this pivot here, drag it over. There's a gap fill, $95, folks. At some point, I think in the next couple of weeks, this is headed to $95 on NVIDIA. Now, off of that level, because it's major support, we likely would get a big sizable bounce. But nonetheless, I do think the probabilities are favoring a move down to 95 in the next few weeks on NVIDIA. All right, couple other stocks in motion today. Tesla had a good bounce. It still has not achieved a short-term target rate of around 198 to 197, but nonetheless, it's rallying. Where would your upside resistance be? Well, clearly we have a gap fill here, and if we bring up the gap fill, this would be the level right here. This would be major resistance if it continues to rally at 246.50. So resistance at 246.50, support at 197, 198 area on that chart. All right, going to Bitcoin real quick. Here's that Bitcoin move that we had just talked about before. Look at this up move here. Again, the high of the day was 70,016. I gave you guys that resistance. This was written on the chart this morning when it was trading below, popped right into it, sold off, going as low as 66,500. It's now settling in around 6,700. 67,285. Again, here's our pivot line. So if we continue down, we want to just watch 63,500 to 400. If we start breaking below and having daily closes below, that's the bearish case. That's where things really turn bearish. As long as we stay up in this upper range up here, to be honest, it's not that bad. It's a little pullbacks. You expect to pull back off resistance. Not really a big deal whatsoever. Looking at gold today, gold was down early in the morning. It ended fractionally lower, still holding this technical support level here. If we zoom out, you can see where that trend line comes from. So again, short-term support still is holding on gold. If we look at silver here, silver small down day as well. It tried to break down. Notice again the dotted line here in the middle, kind of still holding price steady. But I would still say silver is on the bearish side as it broke below this pivot line here. Anything, as long as it stays below this line here around 27.70 or so, I would favor a move down towards 26 before it hits major technical support. Oil today, taking a look at crude oil, continued its march towards the level that I gave all the way back when we were trading at 84 here. I said, guys, watch for that level at 74 to get tagged. We are now only about $1.75 away on oil from tagging that technical support. And again, just a reminder, it's a technical support. You might get a good swing trade off that level, but just a reminder, I ultimately think as the macro data weakens, we will likely head even lower than 74. But do I think it could bounce from 74 back to 77 or 78? Yes, I do think that you could get a technical bounce there. Speaking of which, let's take a look at natural gas, which was bouncing this morning. It ultimately had a flat to slightly, looks like slightly positive day here. A little bit of a doji there. That's slightly bullish. I like the fact that during market hours, it was trading below the yellow trend line. But by the end of the candle, it was back above. So again, slightly bullish there with a doji. Dojis tend to be at lows a little bit on the bullish side. Not as good as bottoming tails in terms of bullish signals, but nonetheless, a little bit of a bullish sign there. All right, I did want to just jump back. FFIV, let's take a look at this one here, see if the earnings are out. Oh, yeah, look at that move. Wow, that's a big move. 177 close all the way up to 205 here. Let's take a look here at levels for potential trading. This high pivot was at 200. We're above that, so that takes me out of play for that. All right, there's a gap fill. I don't know if it'll get there. So there's two levels I see here, but they both are close. There's a pivot high here at around 216 to 217, and then there's a gap fill right at 222. That would be my zone for heavy resistance on the chart of FFIV. That's still a long way higher, right? It got to 205 when we're talking 216, 217, but it's very, very possible based on how momentum could take it up tomorrow during the hours. If you get a short squeeze on that, that could be a very, very good level. That's a big move, folks. Just want to go back and check out Sprouts. SFM, I think, was the Sprouts chart here. And if we look at this, oh, it got to 92. So it did push up a little bit higher. Didn't quite get to that level that we were just discussing, though, which was, I think, around 95, right? I said 95 to 96. Yep. So right around 95 is that level. It's very close. It might get there in the after hours. Wow. Good to see. I mean, listen, there wasn't a whole lot of action or big earnings after the bell here, but in all fairness, the couple stocks that we looked at, those are some big moves right there in the after hours, setting us up for potential good trading opportunities in the Apex Live day trading room tomorrow morning. All right. So again, quieter day, market's choppy, but remember that QQQ NASDAQ 100 wedge pattern. Remember the S&P level. It's going to be very easy for us as technical traders to decipher whether we're breaking down tomorrow or we're going to break out. Right now, you'd probably favor a breakdown, but you're still technically within that level. So therefore, let's let the price action tell us. Let's not force anything on the markets. Let's watch and see what tomorrow has. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, guys, at Trading the Close. I'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern time for the game plan. Take care.